You're watching Free Speech TV.
From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now! We're broadcasting from the Bolivian town of Tiquipaya, just outside Cochabamba. This is the site of the World People's Summit on Climate Change.
The word is that nothing is definitive, that we always can change things. The system was privatized already here. We could put it back, we could break that, and we could get back the company into our hands, something that we never imagined that could happen.
Water Wars. In this special broadcast from Bolivia, we mark the 10th anniversary of the revolt against the privatization of Cochabamba's water supply by the U.S. corporation Bechtel. We'll speak with Marcela Oliveira of the Coalition for the Defense of Water and Life, and with Jim Schultz, editor of the book Dignity and Defiance, Stories from Bolivia's Challenge to Globalization. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Bolivia. The U.S. Securities Exchange Commission has filed a civil suit accusing the Wall Street giant Goldman Sachs of securities fraud for selling a mortgage investment that was established to fail. The investment consisted of pools of risky mortgages that had been packaged together. According to the SEC, the pools were picked by another Goldman client who was betting against their success. The client, John Paulson, made over $3.7 billion from the collapse of the housing market, but is not named in the suit. The SEC's Director of Enforcement, Robert Khuzami, said Goldman was in clear violation of disclosure rules.
The rule is that you need to play fair. You need to provide the kind of proper and full disclosure that the securities laws require, or face the consequences.
Investors lost over $1 billion on the securities linked to the suit. The case marks the first time federal regulators have taken legal action against a Wall Street firm for profiting from the housing market crash. In Afghanistan, new figures show the number of civilians killed by U.S.-led NATO troops has more than doubled this year. NATO forces killed 72 civilians in the first 3 months of 2010, compared to 29 during the same period in 2009. In other news from Afghanistan, 3 Italian aid workers have been released 1 week after their arrest by Afghan forces. The 3 work with the charity Emergency, which runs a series of hospitals in Afghanistan. They were detained on suspicion of involvement in a plot to kill a provincial governor, but the Afghan government says an investigation has since proven their innocence. One of the 3, Marco Garatiti, spoke out shortly after his release.
We are very happy to be released, and we are very happy that our name, our own personal name, and the reputation of the emergency is clear and clean. This is why we are tremendously happy.
There has been some speculation the emergency workers were targeted for speaking out against NATO and Afghan military actions that have harmed Afghan civilians. Earlier this year, another of the 3 aid workers, Mateo Dalada, appeared on Democracy Now! During the U.S. assault on the town of Marja.
90% of the victims are civilians, and 30% of these 90 are children. But I don't think that the war is a solution for problems. I don't think at all this. War is not a solution. It's just a tragedy, And this, we can feel this tragedy every day, 24 hours per day, in our emergency room, in our hospital.
In Pakistan, around 50 people were killed this weekend in a pair of suicide attacks. On Sunday, 7 people died. Another 21 were wounded in a suicide car bombing of a police station in the Pakistani northwestern city of Kohat. The attack came 1 day after at least 41 people were killed and over 60 wounded at a nearby camp for Pakistani refugees. Defense Secretary Robert Gates has acknowledged sending a classified memo earlier this year that reportedly warned the U.S. lacks a strategy for dealing with Iran. On Saturday, the New York Times reported Gates had sent a memo in January that served as a wake-up call for the Obama administration to revisit its Iran strategy. Both Gates and the White House have acknowledged the memo, but say it didn't spark a major reassessment. Iran, meanwhile, continues to criticize the Obama administration's stance. On Sunday, the Iranian president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, called on the U.S. to withdraw all of its troops from the Gulf region and Afghanistan. His comments come one day after he called on the U.S. to destroy its entire nuclear arsenal and said future disarmament talks should be run by states that don't have atomic bombs. In Ecuador, President Rafael Correa has announced he'll unveil legislation to reduce foreign control over Ecuadorian oil production. Correa announced the proposal Saturday in a televised address.
We are sending a bill to Congress that would allow for the exploration of oil fields should the companies not want to sign the new contracts. Every day that passes, there are millions of dollars going to the companies that should be going to the Ecuadorian state.
Most of Europe's major airports remain closed for a fifth consecutive day due to a volcanic eruption emitting a cloud of ash from Iceland. Thousands of flights have been canceled since last week, stranding passengers making their way to and from Europe. Major airlines are pressuring European officials to drop the flight restrictions as the ash clears. But aviation officials in countries including Britain, France, Germany, and the Netherlands say their airspace will remain closed at least through today. President Obama was among those whose travel plans were disrupted by the volcanic ash. The White House canceled Obama's scheduled trip to Poland on Sunday for the funeral of Polish President Lech Kaczynski. The auto giant Toyota has agreed to a $16.4 million fine for hiding safety flaws in pedals sold in over 2 million vehicles. The fine's the most allowed by law and would be the largest ever paid by an automaker. It could have totaled over $13 billion if not for the $16.4 million cap. The Transportation Department says it's considering imposing a second maximum fine over another set of defects related to the pedals. A widow of one of the 29 people killed in the West Virginia mining disaster earlier this month has filed a wrongful death suit against the mine's owner, Massey Energy. The suit from Marlene Griffith accuses Massey of aggravated conduct in its handling of working conditions and safety violations at the mine. The Upper Big Branch explosion was the worst mining disaster in 40 years. Massey Energy has been cited for thousands of safety violations in recent years, with 57 citations just last month. A group of journalists, attorneys, and human rights activists are challenging revisions to U.S. surveillance laws that they say are hampering their ability to do their work. On Fridays, members of the group told a federal appeals court they've been forced to forego communicating by phone or email out of fear of government surveillance. The revised 2008 surveillance law dropped a requirement that the government identify the subjects of its surveillance. Joanne Mariner of Human Rights Watch says she's made 3 recent trips to meet former CIA prisoners in Jordan to avoid speaking to them by phone. In another domestic spy news, the Washington Post is reporting the National Security Agency has stopped collecting certain forms of data after objections from the federal court overseeing domestic surveillance. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court had raised concerns over how the NSA collects records, but not the content of different forms of communication. And federal prosecutors have filed weapons charges against 5 former top officials at the private military firm Blackwater. The 5 were charged Friday for their alleged roles in illegally stockpiling automatic weapons at Blackwater's North Carolina headquarters. The defendants include former Blackwater President Gary Jackson and former Blackwater counsel Andrew Howell. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. We're broadcasting live from just outside Cochabamba, Bolivia. I'm Amy Goodman.